Wow, everybody, on today's show, the Gold Glove winners were announced, and I think we have to talk about them for the National League. Mark Melancon declines his player option, and most importantly, should Fernando Tatis Jr. win the MVP, and should we be getting mad at people saying that he shouldn't? Certain writers, perhaps, from the San Diego Union-Tribune. All that and more, guys. Locked On Padres, you know what it is. Here we go.
You are Locked On Padres, your daily San Diego Padres podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Padres podcast, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day for November 10th. That's right, Wednesday, November 10th, everybody. As always, I am your host with sometimes, occasionally, but certainly not always the most, Javier Reyes. That's especially the case for today. You might be familiar with some of my baseball-related work at places like Baseball FYI, Friars on Base, Off Bench Baseball, or Just Baseball, to which I am a staff writer for. Got a piece coming out for them soon about the Padres rotation, which we'll talk about next week. And you can check out and follow me, of course, on Twitter, as always, at Javipeno, JAVIIPENO, or at L_Padres, where all the Padres-centric memes and takes mostly stem from over on the Twitter. And then if you saw me just now as pointing at my name, that means you're watching the YouTube. You can check out the YouTube Locked On Padres on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe. We recently crossed the 100 subscriber mark, which is very kind of cute and nice. And you can also find that in the audio description, by the way, from all my audio listeners for the podcast. For today's show, first of all, I usually say thank you for making Locked On Padres your first listen. We had a crisis. Look, I recorded my episode literally like yesterday morning. And then what happened is I got really, really busy and I was like, okay, no problem. I already recorded my episode. We're good to go. We're good to go, ladies and gentlemen. And then this damn Restream app decided to just randomly, not only did I lose my audio, but not all of it though. See, I would have been actually less annoyed if I lost all the audio of my podcast that I originally recorded today. I was more annoyed that just 29 minutes in, just randomly, just cut off. So the last like 8 minutes were completely unusable, so I have to record now. And I didn't have any time to record. So my apologies for the late podcast, guys. Thankfully, though, the topics are at least still somewhat relevant. And they're actually going to be more relevant, which is why I wanted to make sure that I still got it out. I'll be a little bit late. Late evening, oh, you guys back home from work, you listen to radio. You know, I'm with Wolfman here. We're talking to you. How you doing? Maybe you got something. You put your feet on the radiator. You know, stuff like that. I don't know what I'm doing right now. But I want to talk about a bunch of topics, guys. I want to talk about Mark Melancon declining his player option with the team, how the National League Gold Gloves were announced, and also Andrew Heaney, by the way. He was signed to the Dodgers, and I actually thought that there's a point to make about that based on the reaction that I saw to it. The Gold Gloves and Heaney, how they released the Padres, and of course, the meat of the episode, Fernando Tatis Jr.'s MVP case, which I've talked about before, but it's been recently, building up because he was named a finalist, guys. So what are we going to get into first? Let's get into Mark Melancon first, guys. If we've already spent enough time talking and apologizing, let's do it. Mark Melancon, recently it was announced via the old Padres folks, via Kevin Acee, just reading his tweet, some Padres updates. Team exercise options on Pierce Johnson for $3 million and Craig Stammen for $4 million, and declined options on Keone Kela and Drake Marisnick. And Mark Melancon declined his player option. So here's my take on this, ladies and gentlemen. Mark Melancon, very effective reliever, man. A very effective reliever. And it hates me to, again, the course of this episode is going to be annoying, repeating the same points I actually thought came out better the first time I recorded, but a lot of people said throughout the season that Mark Melancon he made you nervous, right? He really did. He made you nervous. You didn't always like the fact that he just didn't get a lot of strikeouts whatsoever. He was not blowing pitches by guys, and it was a high pitch count fairly frequently for Mark Melancon. But the bottom line is he got the job done. You know what I'm saying? He was one of the leaders in saves, at least for a while, before the team decided not to even give him chances to close games, which isn't his fault. He was one of the leaders in saves for basically a good portion of the season. And what I like about him the most is the fact that he didn't really cost anything. He really didn't cost anything. Mark Melancon, who I'm trying to pull up his kind of profile here, which I can't, unfortunately. Shout out to this app not working. Nothing's working for me lately, but he was really good. And what I like is that the Padres opted for, and I just mentioned Keone Kela, they could have gotten Trevor Rosenthal last year. Trevor Rosenthal, who was electric. He's coming back from being an elite closer to having Tommy John surgery and missing 2 years of baseball, basically. It's coming back and throwing 100 miles an hour, being awesome for the Royals. And then the Padres trade for him, and he was also awesome, making batters miss like it was nothing. But he cost a whole lot more for that strikeout power, for those raw metrics and stuff. And the Padres instead opted to go for Mark Melancon and Keone Kela, going for 2 low-cost options instead of just one. And what happened? I mean, in fairness, Trevor Rosenthal did get hurt, but Mark Melancon was awesome. And what I love about this is that I think this is the blueprint to use going forward. Relief pitchers can be incredibly volatile when it comes to positions in baseball. And I just don't trust going so high. The reason why Mark Melancon declined this option is probably because he thinks he's going to get more from another team. Maybe the White Sox are going to swoop in because they're a team that really desperately needs relief pitching. He's been in the setup role before. Or not necessarily in a while, but he's been in a setup sort of role before. He strikes me as a guy that could at least work in that type of role. They already went for Craig Kimbrell. They're giving him the money. So the White Sox need to improve their bullpen. For the Padres, my thing is, why don't we just repeat history where we try and instead bank on a Craig Stammen and Pierce Johnson, bank on the fact that you'll get a healthy Drew Pomeranz hopefully next year. Maybe you even have Chris Paddock, depending on how things shake out in the starting pitching rotation. Ladies and gentlemen, based on how that pans out, maybe Chris Paddock ends up being a bullpen guy. Maybe Adrian Morejon ends up being a bullpen guy. It's still way too early to predict exactly what the final, 5-man rotation is going to be for the Padres, and I mean that. I would actually only say that Joe Musgrove is the only one that I know for sure will probably stay with the team. I'm serious. I mean, I don't think there is anyone that is necessarily a suitor for Blake Snell, Yu Darvish. I'm just saying that, let's just say Joe Musgrove is the only one that I'm for certain will be our kind of guy to root for next year. But with Mark Melancon, I think that, the biggest thing going for him was his consistency throughout his whole career, at least basically since 2014. And that needs to be brought up because I think that that's what you should be looking for if you're the Padres right now. There's a lot of other relievers on the market. You got Raisel Iglesias, you got Kenley Jansen, you got guys like that. You got those top-heavy sort of guys. I mean, Garcia's around there, but I don't think you should be paying top dollar because this isn't necessarily an area that's easy to predict. Very often it falls into pieces. It's just like into the second half. The Padres are hopefully going to have a little bit more consistent starting pitching next year, which may aid the fact that their relief pitching had a little bit of a burden. You know what I mean? There was kind of a burden on them because the fact that Ryan Weathers was out here going only 3 innings for a month, giving up 8 runs. So then you had to rely on guys like Nabil Crisbat to come in and save the day. You know what I'm saying? And I think that that's why that's just how I feel, guys. I don't really think that the Padres should be too worried about it. Would I be upset if they brought him back? No, because of the consistency. Like I said, I mean, if you just look at his seasons, since basically 2013, 1.39 ERA, 2014, 1.9 ERA, 2015, 2.23, 2016 in total with Pittsburgh and Washington, 1.64 ERA. With the Giants, which I've talked about with Ben Kaspick before and how he's kind of the bane of Giants fans' existence, he for some reason just fell off there, 4.5 ERA and then 3.23 ERA, which isn't terrible. He just had one off season in 2017, 2019, and then he improves going to Atlanta eventually with a 2.78 ERA. Bottom line is this isn't like someone like Blake Trinan, who years ago literally had an ERA under 1 and then it bloated up and whatnot. That's kind of what happens with relief pitchers. So while I'm not saying that I wouldn't want the Padres to re-sign Mark Melancon for the right deal, I'm just saying let's not panic. The Shark is very good. And like I said, while the strikeout stuff isn't exactly there, this year he had 59 strikeouts over the course of, if I could get the innings pitched, that would be great. 64 innings, which isn't all that many. It's still, he got the job done. So while the Padres, I imagine, have a lot of other bigger fish to fry, with Mark Melancon, the Shark, I'm going to miss him. if he is not brought back to the team, but whoever gets him, I think that they have a solid pitcher on their hands. Just be careful to hope that he's not going to anchor your entire bullpen staff. So with the Padres, hopefully Pierce Johnson, Craig Stammen, guys like Neil Krismat, guys like, hey, Miguel Diaz actually had some moments for the team this year, especially with the strikeout rate, even if a little bit of a lack of control with some of his off-speed stuff was very positive. And then you have Drew Pomeranz, who you're already paying a decent amount of money to, who what I would assume would probably be the closer if we do have a new closer role open up. Although I will say the only guy, Emilio Pagan, although he is Puerto Rican, I got love for my Puerto Rican power homies, of course. Maybe don't have him closing out games. That's the only guy that I must say is a little bit of a problem for the team right now, guys. But before we get into kind of talking about the main topic at hand, which is Mr. Fernando Tatis Jr. and his MVP case, guys, I want to talk to you about the best protein bars in all the land. Ladies and gentlemen, I love Thanksgiving. I love all the food and the treats and plenty of them. But when I want a yummy dessert, you know what I mean? Maybe I should start considering a different route. Maybe I should consider the route of the Built Bars, ladies and gentlemen. Built Bar is the new holiday dessert. Feast on something delicious and feel good about it. One slice of pie has upwards of 300 calories, and that's on the low end. Most Built Bars are only 130 calories and only 4 grams of sugar with plenty of protein. Replace that coconut cream pie with a coconut Built Bar, maybe a coconut brownie chunk Built Bar, which is one of the best flavors. Or instead of a raspberry pie, you go for the raspberry Built Bar. Lots of good flavors, guys, to replace any pie. They got blueberry muffin, cherry barcia, which is my mom's favorite flavor, which I've mentioned a bunch of times. Very, very good stuff. Low calorie, low carb, low fat, high protein, and covered in 100% chocolate, by the way. These things are also they just taste good. I should have mentioned that off the top. They really do taste good. I love these things. I have them all the time. So guys, what are you waiting for? Go to built.com and use promo code LOCKED15 and you'll get 15% off your order. Remember, that is promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. All right. Hopefully we're in the second segment. Hopefully my microphone just randomly doesn't just not pick up my audio for the rest of the episode. Anyway, guys, now let's talk into the main crux of the episode. And it's a little bit of a beef I have. All right. A lot of Padres fans were losing their mind on the old interwebs. And why is that? It's because the San Diego Union-Tribune published an article. Tatis is the best player in the league, but shouldn't win the NL MVP. This was written by Nick Canepa. Hopefully I'm saying that name right. And here's the thing. A lot of people were losing their mind, and they were saying this and that. All right. Tatis was announced as a finalist for the National League MVP award, which should be announced. I believe it is by the time you guys are hearing this. Maybe you're hearing this on a Thursday, but it'll be coming out on a Wednesday. So you'll be hearing the reveal soon. It's between Juan Soto, Bryce Harper, and Fernando Tatis Jr. And I think that there's a lot of cases to be made for both guys. This isn't as much of a layup as it is in the American League with Shohei Ohtani over Vlad Jr. Sorry, guys. It's Shohei Ohtani. Stop overthinking it. It is a dude pitching and hitting at the same time. I don't want to hear it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, all the stat nerds, get out of my mentions. But in terms of the National League, I don't understand why this San Diego Union-Tribune article was getting everybody in much of a fuss. Maybe this will get me canceled on Padres Twitter. I don't know. I don't care in a lot of ways to a degree because people are just, they're just really passionate. And I think every now and then some people may get a little bit ahead of themselves, but then eventually we're all good and we forgive each other at some point, right? I read the article and I thought that Mr. Nick made some decent points. I thought that the main points he made were, look, this team absolutely collapsed in the second half. And also he missed 31 games. So, while he does also, I disagree with the fact that he doesn't necessarily seem to use all that many advanced stats. He maybe doesn't understand what OPS is necessarily, but I did think that the article, that's a good point. Guys, I understand. And I was listening to Ben Woods, by the way, the other day, to get some street cred. Shout out Anthony Burris, who's been begging for me to finally listen to Anthony Burris and to Ben and Woods. So I'm going to do that more often. And they were bringing the point up and saying, him missing games with the amount of production that he gave, maybe that shows you just how valuable he was, because look what he did in such a small sample size. To that I say, okay, that's fair. Yeah, that's fair. But then you can start making arguments about a lot of guys that didn't play all that much. That means Jacob deGrom should win the Cy Young because when he was pitching, he was great, right? Part of a player's value is how available they are. It's what I always praise about Manny Machado and the fact that no player has played in more games than him since 2016, 2017, which is massively impressive. Best availability is just being available. You know what I mean? So that has to be brought up in this. And I thought that the writing was smug. The writing was certainly irreverent. And if that turns some people off, I get it. Look, I write like a punk a lot of times. Like I am a real smug son of a gun. I'm a terrible human being, guys. You probably know this by now. I'm terrible. I'm awful. But I will say that just the main conceit of the article, it's just I didn't have that much of a problem with it. When you look at Juan Soto and Bryce Harper, here's my view on who should win the MVP. I don't think it should be Tatis. I think it should be Bryce Harper. And here's why. With Tatis, forgive me for using narrative, but I just think one, the game's missed for sure. But when I look at it, I look at a guy who came back to a team and he was very solid. He was very good. He was an elite player, knocking home runs. I even remember the extra innings game when he hit the game tying home run that they eventually lose to the Dodgers, that 16 inning nightmare. But I do think it does matter to a degree that the thing that people are going to remember from this Padres team was the fact that it was one of the great collapses in the history of baseball, right? And I don't necessarily like the idea of rewarding that. Now, of course, that's not his fault. It's okay. I'm not saying it's his fault. I'm not saying he's not deserving. 22 years old and being nominated for the MVP, being the finalist, that's already incredible. We should celebrate that. We don't need some trophy to tell us, you know what I mean, how valuable Tatis is. It's okay. All right. You look at Juan Soto, though, and I feel the same way. Look, I understand the stat nerds we'll pull up his baseball savant page, his barrel percentage, his on base in the second half was 520. I get it. But I also think to a degree, it matters that Juan Soto did not have a single meaningful at bat in the second half, a single meaningful at bat. And what I mean by that is not just for him and not just in the sense that like it literally means nothing. I'm saying that team tanked in the second half. They went full rebuild. They traded Scherzer. They traded Trey Turner. They traded Kyle Schwarber. They traded everybody. They even traded what's his name to the Padres that I'm blanking on right now. The relief pitcher. They traded Daniel Hudson. They traded everybody away. They went full rebuild and they lost like 90 plus games. Do we really want to say that the MVP, and while it is cool that baseball isn't officially just making it, you have to be on a good team in order to win the MVP. I think that that's great. I think that that's an improvement on the way that we view the MVP award and the best player. But my thing is, I just think most valuable, this isn't best player award. Maybe that's how you view it, but most valuable suggests that there was a little bit of winning involved. And I just think that Juan Soto, maybe he performs better under pressure. I don't know. But there wasn't a single meaningful at bat where he got up to the plate and he's batting and he's like, I know I need to come through here because we're in the thick of a playoff race. I think stuff like that matters. And with Bryce Harper, he wasn't getting anything to hit. I mean, this is a team that loses Rhys Hoskins, who was their main other slugger on the team. They have Gene Segura, and they've got, Andrew McCutchen a little bit. But besides that, JT Realmuto, you got Didi Gregorius, you got Alec Boehm, who completely fell off. Their offense was terrible. Even their starting pitching, with the exception of Zach Wheeler, who was awesome this year. Aaron Nola was just an absolute bum this year for them. Like, just completely couldn't give them a start when they needed it. Bryce Harper, with that on-base percentage, with the OPS, with the WAR, yes, he missed some games too, but he was always there when the team needed him to hit a big home run pitch. He came through when it mattered. I know some people have been joking, with also Mark Melancon and also with Bryce Harper, the fact that their teams won World Series, the Braves with Melancon, and then the Nationals with Bryce Harper, one after those two guys left, right? Like, it must be kind of unfortunate for them. Hey, look, I think Bryce Harper certainly enjoyed the checks that he's getting right now, and the fact that he's playing well. It's not his fault. I think that carries a great amount with it. I think that that's what it is. So if I were voting, I would have Tatis number 2, and I would have Juan Soto 3rd. It's a little bit close between 2nd and 3rd, but for me, it's Bryce Harper, man. They were in a little bit more contention, and he needed to come up big. And he came up big when he needed to. With the Padres, the thing that we're going to remember about this season is the collapse. And it just feels a little weird to be like, hey, you know how your team had the greatest second half collapse and you didn't make the playoffs? Yeah, your guy wins the MVP anyway. It has to be brought up. It has to be brought up, at least in my opinion. And I hate to say it, but I just think that we shouldn't be getting that mad. I saw people making the point on Twitter, on Padres Twitter, saying, look at Nick coming out here, Nick Canepa, coming on here and just, crapping on the San Diego Union-Tribune, just crapping on the only beloved athlete we've had, or the most beloved athlete we've had in the only team that the San Diego City has, and just absolutely crapping on him. I don't think he crapped on him. I just think that he gave his opinion and saying, look, like, he's great, but like, I don't think he should win the MVP. I didn't find that he was just, trashing the player. It's not like he got out here and wrote an article about how the 3-0 pitch was the worst thing that's happened in San Diego sports history, right? That's not what happened here. So that's just how I feel about it, guys. I don't think that that's a wise way to go either. Just because it's San Diego Union-Tribune doesn't mean they have to do the slurping. Doesn't mean they have to just, as Mike Wilbon says, the slurpage of, certain athletes that goes on right now, right? It's a little bit sus of a verb to use, but you guys get what I'm saying, where just because it's Tribune doesn't mean they have to automatically praise everything that happens. They're not here. It's called being objective. That's called objective, more, even keeled journalism and reporting and analysis. At least that's how I feel about it. I think Tatis, I would love for him to win the MVP, but I think it's going to be Bryce Harper, and I think it should be Bryce Harper. He was incredible this year and had a lot of big moments. I know Tatis was great. I know that he offers speed. And I know that, in a smaller sample size, he was great. And he certainly had a lot of moments, but a lot of that came from the first half, especially in regards to the moment. So that's just how I feel about it, guys. Leave my guy Nick alone. It was a fine piece. It's not worth getting mad about. It's not like the discrepancy is that Tatis is losing to Dansby Swanson. You know what I mean? Juan Soto and Bryce Harper are great players. I'm not going to be that upset. The one that I would be upset about is Ohtani, because that would show that people really only care about numbers and they don't care about the fact that we hadn't seen someone do what Ohtani did in like hundreds of years, specifically like a century. Like that would just show, wow, you guys really just are hate fun. You know what I'm saying? If you're voting for Vladimir Guerrero Jr. this year, who was great. But sorry, the guy did two things. Just stop. So that's how I feel about it, guys. But before we kind of wind down the podcast and get into the last segment, guys, I want to talk to you about betting. Maybe you're betting on the MVP thing. Maybe you're doing basketball season stuff because it has, been underway. We've got football as well. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all that stuff, guys. Head to their new updated desktop or mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use the promo code LOCKEDON to receive your bonus. But of course, not just basketball and football, guys. It's also got baseball, and they've also got the NHL. They've got boxing, they've got UFC, and they've got all your favorite, Vegas games. They've got everything for you guys. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the rest of 2021 and beyond. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, guys, you ready to wind this bad boy down? I think I'm ready to wind this bad boy down. Let's talk really quickly about two separate things that I got a little bit late on. I'm not going to lie. Again, I am so frustrated that my episode did not take the audio. I've been looking at my levels this whole time. If it doesn't work this time, man, I'm just losing my mind. I really am. I just don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know what I'm going to do. It just might be one of those weeks. But anyway, guys, let me just quickly run through the National League Gold Glove winners. Okay. There were a couple Padres that were nominated, Manny Machado and, or was it just Manny Machado? Am I wrong? Yes, it was Manny Machado, but last week I talked about Machado. It was deserving of winning the Gold Glove, and I also talked about Jake Cronenworth and whether or not he should have been a nominee. You go look back at that episode, broke it down, and how I felt about it with outs above average and sort of all these metrics. And the winners were pitcher Max Fried, Jacob Stallings for catcher, Paul Goldschmidt for first base, Tommy Edman for second base, Nolan Arenado for third base, Brandon Crawford for shortstop. Left field, we had Tyler O'Neill, center field, Harrison Bader, and right field, Adam Duvall. So no, it did not end up going to Manny Machado. And I said I understood it. While Nolan Arenado, his offensive stats were maybe not necessarily as good as Manny Machado's. Yes, the power was up there. Yes, the RBIs were up there, but the on-base skills weren't there. It just wasn't the same as it was with some of his years in Colorado, in my opinion, although still a very good player for them. His outs above average were above everybody else. The defensive runs saved were about above everybody else, too. I had no problem with Nolan Arenado winning this award. And part of this, yes, there is part of this that makes you say, are they putting some count and some weight into the fact that the Cardinals had that incredible run of like the 18 games in a row? They make the playoffs. Yes, they lose, but it was still such an incredible run. Maybe they are. And maybe they're remembering that Nolan Arenado had, like I said, a lot of the big RBIs, a lot of big hits for the team on that winning streak. That's possible. Bottom line, it doesn't upset me. And most importantly, I think the Padres need to learn from this. And I think specifically fans need to learn from this. A lot of people have said they should sign Nick Castellanos. Okay. Not a bad bat. He'd be great. I'd love to put him in left field. He's played left field before, especially since Tommy Pham is going to be a free agent. Nick Castellanos isn't awfully. And regularly, given what Castellanos can do, that wouldn't necessarily be an immediate problem for mine, even if he is a super minus. My problem is the Padres have a lot of minuses or at best question marks when it comes to their defense. You got Trent Grisham, right? But then everything else is a little bit weird. Do we still believe in Austin Nola to be behind the plate and defensive catcher, given that he's just seemingly never healthy? And of course, at first base, who I will not name, we have some other question marks. Tommy Pham and Will Myers are huge minuses in the outfield. We have that huge minus at first base. We've got Tatis, who's a little bit up and down. We don't necessarily know what we're going to get from him. Maybe the Padres should be looking to getting a solid player offensively and a guy who can give you some really good defense. Maybe you look at a guy like Avisaíl Garcia in the offseason, and maybe you look at some other players when it comes to the offensive department. But maybe you just go for a little bit of defense. That matters. Guys, the Cardinals had 5 guys that won Gold Gloves this year. That's insane. I talked about Tommy Edman. I talked about how maybe Jay Cronenworth should have been a finalist over Colton Wong, but Tommy Edman was sensational with the 10 outs above average at second base. He was so good as a defensive player, not as good as a player as Jay Cronenworth, because Jay Cronenworth, a plus defender and a very much plus offensive player, which Tommy Edman is not. But I'm just saying, maybe the Padres should start looking into this because they had a lot of minuses this year, man. And it's not like Will Myers, Tommy Pham, and the guy at first base are doing all that much for you offensively. I don't care what happens with Tatis at shortstop sometimes, given what he does offensively, but that's just how I view it. Maybe they should take that into account. Just maybe. And maybe while it's a little bit hard sometimes when you're watching games to measure defense, you can only sometimes go when you're watching the games on TV by an error. Tatis made all these errors. It's true, but you don't get like that bird's eye view of the mound where you can range things like reaction time, like the range, like the speed to getting to the ball, because all you see is the ball get hit and then all of a sudden it's at the player. So you don't really always see that. When a ball sneaks by the infield, you won't know when you're watching the game necessarily if that was actually not the best defensive footwork and what have you by whoever was playing that defensive position. It's a lot harder to gauge that when you're watching versus looking at home runs and looking at WRC plus, whatever, when judging players in games and what have you. So I think that some people sometimes forget how to judge defense and forget that it is still very much important. Just a little bit harder to decipher and a little bit hard to nail down. So I do think the Padres should monitor that for sure and look at some plus defenders, unless they're able to move off the guy from first base. I feel a lot better about them signing whoever the heck they want. He could be a minus 17 outs above average. I would be so thrilled if they got rid of the guy at first base. But now, guys, I also want to quickly mention Andrew Heaney signed a 1-year, $8.5 million contract with the Dodgers, which regularly would not be something that I talk about on this here podcast. But again, I want to just take aim just for a second. Bow, at Padres Twitter, at people, and not even just Padres Twitter, but everybody making fun of the fact that Andrew Heaney was extremely bad and for you to pay him that much money. Okay, so here's the thing. The Dodgers want to kind of reinforce their rotation, considering the fact that they could lose Max Scherzer. We don't know. I don't know if they will. Considering the fact that the Trevor Bauer situation is going on, considering the fact that Clayton Kershaw is a free agent, all of that considered, and you have Walker Buehler, you still have a lot of good pitching stuff, but they figured, let's take a low ball shot on this guy. Let's just see what happens. It's not a bad, strategy to have whatsoever, in my opinion. A lot of people are making fun of them, and you remember that Andrew Heaney with the Yankees this year was seen like kind of looking, or at least it looked like he was crying in the dugout after giving up so many runs for the team when they needed some big wins, which was very sad, and I felt really bad about it. But, Andrew Heaney can strike guys out. His strikeout rate is among some of the tops in the league, especially last season and a couple seasons before. He's always had that whiff stuff. So with the Dodgers, here is what I've been saying, and I mentioned this a lot with Odell Beckham Jr. When it comes to the discourse surrounding him. I wish that I wish for SEO purposes I could just put Odell Beckham Jr. In the title. That way it could pick up some views and whatnot. But with Odell Beckham Jr., a lot of people tell me, well, now he gets released from the Browns and he got traded away from the Giants. Doesn't it say a lot about him? It does. It does to an extent. But also, you need to put weight into the fact of what organizations we're talking about here. The Giants have not shown that they're very competent since like 2015. You know what I mean? When you draft Daniel Jones 4th overall, you don't get any. They've been a mess. You know what I'm saying? Until proven otherwise, that they're going to go back to being the consistent, smart organization they are, getting traded away from the Giants isn't exactly an indictment, in my opinion. And the Cleveland Browns, despite their recent success, getting lost by them or what have you, isn't exactly as big of an indictment on the player, in my opinion. And we could, again, this isn't a football podcast. That's just how I feel. Anything the Dodgers do, as far as I'm concerned, until further notice, does not deserve to be roasted. You know what I'm saying? Yes, you can roast maybe the Trevor Bauer thing for an entirely different reason for what it says about sports and society as a whole. But when it comes to getting these guys that are perceived as being bad players, maybe they know what to do. Maybe they're looking at this guy and saying, we like the swing and miss stuff. We just want to take a flyer on him. And money doesn't matter to the Dodgers. And since this is not like a hard salary cap sport, they don't care. They're like, all right, we'll pay him $8 million. Who gives a crap? You know what I mean? We like him. Let's bring him in here for a certain amount of money. Maybe we can make him better, or at least better than what he was doing with the Yankees. Maybe we can make him better against certain teams. There's a lot of numbers, I imagine, that teams in front office have behind the scenes and on their laptops and computers and what have you. Maybe they know that Andrew Heaney is a perfect match against the Padres, against the Dodgers, the Giants, against the Rockies, against the Diamondbacks, whatever. Maybe that's what they think he could be used for. Bottom line is, until further notice, we should not be making fun of a move that the Dodgers make like that. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, you can do it for fun, but I'm just saying, if Andrew Heaney comes out next year and has a 3.5 ERA and is striking out guys up, he finishes with 190 strikeouts, I'm just saying it's the Dodgers, and until further notice, I have no reason to believe that the moves that they make are without at least a tiny amount of merit. Feel free to roast me for this take as well. Feel free to roast me for the San Diego Tribune thing, but that's just how I feel, guys. Now, before we officially kind of wind down this very delayed podcast, again, I'm sorry about that. I just want to say thank you for making Locked On Padres, even though it might not have been this time, your first listen every day. Now make your second listen your daily one-stop shop for all your gambling needs, guys. That is Locked On Bets, hosted by your boy Q, with expert analysis and insight from Lee Sterling. And now, just to talk about what you can expect from the future of this pod, guys. Tomorrow, going to be giving my breakdown, probably just one more time, running through my thoughts on Fernando Tatis Jr. If it is announced the MVP award tomorrow, which I imagine is going to go to Bryce Harper. But most importantly, going to be beginning my breakdown of Keith Law's top 50 free agents over at The Athletic. So you guys can go check that out if you have the subscription and you'd like. Going to be starting with the first 10 to 15 players and giving my thoughts on them. And just kind of, I did this last year with the top 50 free agents, and Keith Law is just a big name. So I feel like that's a guy to start with. Going to be breaking that down and breaking down which guys I think that the Padres should be interested in, and just talking fun about free agents. Free agent talk is always fun, at least in my opinion, guys. So we're going to be talking about that. And then Friday, very, very special episode, talking with Taylor Blake Ward and Bobby Fontaine Jr., who is a former scout. All right. And he's a guy who scouted Tony Gwynn, Ozzie Smith, big time players, Randy Johnson. And we had a great conversation about scouting, about all that stuff, and their new book that is out. That you guys should definitely check out, that I will be putting in the description on Friday's episode. It's a really fun chat. And we do talk some Padres stuff for sure, but we just kind of talk baseball. And I really, really think you guys are going to enjoy it. One of my favorite episodes that I've done with a guest in a very long time, I must say. And I've had plenty of great guests on this show, from Hannah Kaiser to Kevin Acey to what have you. But I really think that this episode you guys are going to like. So look forward to that on Friday. And that about does it for today's edition of the Locked On Padres podcast, the only pod that may be better than the Padres themselves. Remember to get your podcast from Stitcher, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Himalaya, wherever. Follow the show or myself on Twitter at Javipeno, Javiipeno. Feel free to send me some 5-star reviews on the Apple Podcasts app. And until next time, stay safe and, of course, stay faithful. My Friar Faithful homies, take care.